Welcome to DigiFest 2019 at Anglia, Ruskin University. Are you paying attention?
Yes.
Great, let's get started. Here is an example of a scenario-based multiple-choice question by Charlie, based on his mental well-being toolkit. This question illustrates the use of tutorial-style questions. You are very nervous about a presentation you have to give because you think it's going to be a disaster. What do? Andrew?
Tell the teacher you are to stay home that day.
Brenda? Do the presentation anyway and allow yourself to feel anxious. Telling yourself it's normal to be nervous. Claire? Drink some alcohol to calm yourself down after the presentation. Who do you agree with?
Correct.
Okay, so that was just a little demo that I wish I could have done live, but I had various problems connecting the echo to the network here. That's the main problem. But normally it works really well, and you can access it on an Alexa device or on a smartphone. Students can use this content in these different contexts, and there's also a text-based version of the content that runs as a standalone HTML file. So students can interact with that on a computer, they can download it from Canvas and run it on their smartphone, for example. So that's the basic, that's what I'm talking about. But what I wanted to do now is sort of just welcome you, tell you a bit about what the point of the talk is. It's a system for producing highly engaging content that can be accessed by students in various ways and enables them to have their own personalized conversation with your course. So the idea, the title, turn your course into a conversation, is quite literal in the sense that we want each student to be having their own interaction, conversational interaction with your course material. And it's not a hypothetical framework. It's not just a framework, it's not just a strategy, it's an actual technology that now is fully working and can let you publish this stuff really quickly, as we managed to demonstrate in the workshop yesterday. So I'm going to try and convince you that it's as easy as possible to create this content. And that not only can you do it, but you should be doing it. So the Alexa device is just one version, and that's the one I've just demonstrated. But the aim of this, there's one aim of the talk, and that is to persuade you that you should, and more importantly, could turn your course into a conversation now. So this is a way that you don't have to do it for a whole course, but you can take any content that you currently teach and design a sort of interactive tutorial. And you do it quickly using just a text editor, and you can then publish that to multiple systems simultaneously and make it accessible to students without any extra work other than the actual script writing. So the first thing is active learning works. So this is part of the why you should use it. Active learning works because, well, it engages students, it tests them, it gives them feedback. It does all the things that research shows works for delivering content, getting things into students' heads. It tends to work better than passive learning. And yes, I don't know, do we agree? Do you agree that active learning works? Or who thinks it's better to sit through a traditional lecture or a more interactive lecture where students discuss questions? Who thinks the traditional lecture is better?
Yeah. I was going to say that, yes, it does work, because I think implicit in active learning is the notion of a continuous challenge.
Yeah.
So you are continually challenging people in the room individually and collectively. So it kind of is obvious to me that, yes, it works.
Yeah, not continual challenge. It's the conversational metaphor works there as well. Because in a conversation, you're always expected to react, you're expected to interact. You're not expected to just sit and listen and look at your mobile phone occasionally. So that brings me to the second question, which is why don't we use it more? And that's a question for you. It's quite a presumptuous question, but I'm assuming you don't use it to the max, that you don't use interactive or active learning techniques as much as you might. So what are the reasons for that?
I think contact time is one reason that it would facilitate using active learning more if we had more hours per week per module with the students.
Okay, so one response then is this system I'm talking about lets you have interactive learning without contact time. It's been designed primarily for use on distance learning courses with students who are taught using this wonderful word asynchronous learning, meaning they don't really have a lot of direct contact time. And this is a way to overcome that, but it also is a way to overcome the lack of content with face-to-face students, and many of them don't make it into our classes, and even if they do, they don't necessarily partake of the interaction or the opportunities that we give them. I'm going to put a graph in here to show that I'm very up to the minute. This is, we were asked to produce our slides for 2nd of September, but this was only published on the 5th of September. So this is good reason why last minute preparation isn't a bad thing. This is a particular research. It's one of many pieces of research that show that active learning tends to produce better performance. This compared physics students being taught different content by either passive lecture style learning or more interactive conceptual question-based discussions with their fellow students in the lecture. And the students who did the active learning performed better on the objective test of learning, which is the TOL acronym. The other measures are all measures of FOL, feeling of learning, and these reveal that the students who had had the passive traditional lectures rated them as being more enjoyable, they felt like they'd learned more, the instructor was more effective at teaching in the passive traditional lecture, and they wish all my physics courses were taught this way more for the passive approach. And the authors of the paper point out that there's essentially a negative correlation between students' perception of what they're learning and what they're actually learning. So that's one reason maybe why there's some resistance, both from students and teaching staff, to adopt more active approaches, because they feel harder. And that is mistaken for students as meaning they're not learning as much. But it's actually the opposite is true. The passive, a slick, well-presented, well-honed lecture can sound very convincing and leave the student feeling that they've learned a lot, but in practice they don't. So that's one piece of evidence. There's many other pieces of evidence to suggest that active approaches tend to work better, as long as they have certain features. So they should be well designed, they should be appropriate, they should be structured well, and they should give students immediate feedback. So active learning where students go off in a group and learn themselves may not be that effective. So it's got to be the right kind of active. Now the approach that I'm proposing, and this is what I'm proposing to do with our modules that are being delivered in distance learning format from the following, not this year, but the next year, is to add two types of content to the existing module content. One is to facilitate what I call a slow conversation, and this is something I've done with modules in the past, where each week you email the students using a mail merge in Microsoft Office, so you can give each student a dear their name email with And just addressing a student by name lets them know that the message is for them and it's not just a circular, and that it can be used then to guide a particular cohort of students through the content. And it sort of integrates quite well with that iceberg model we were just saw in the keynote, where you're trying to balance their learning, you're trying to get them engaged from the start, you're trying to get them to work at the pace that is appropriate for the content. So this is going to be implemented with email and Canvas. And the first week they'll just all get the same email with it personalized with their name. And the second week they'll get one of two versions of the email. One version if they engaged with what I asked them to do, and one version if they didn't. And we can link that approach to a retention process as well. So we can sort of detect if students aren't going online and doing the tasks. So a lot of you maybe do this already, but this is a way of sort of automating it, doing it on a large scale, and ensuring that all the students are getting are on board, essentially, doing the stuff. So that's what I call a slow conversation, and that can be done using our existing technology. But the fast conversation, this is intended to be a substitute for the conversation you might have face-to-face with a student, which is something we can't really do. We certainly can't do it on distance learning courses, but even face-to-face courses, we can't physically have a one-to-one interaction with each student. So these interactive learning units, as I call them, are able to give students immediate feedback. They're delivered via these units that can be, students can access it on a Kindle, on a smartphone, via text or via voice. They can do it while they're on the train. They can do it while they're in the bath. They can do it while they're jogging, because you can just use this content just by listening and talking back. And it also solves problems of accessibility. We don't have to do specially transcribed versions for deaf students, or specially audio transcribed versions for blind students. We can just have one version that all students can access. Interactive learning units are the core of the system, and here's an example. The text I gave you, the demonstration I showed you at the start, is written like this. It's just a simple text script. It's got two markups. One markup is a double slash at the start of the line, which says, this is a new page, a frame, which contains a short chunk of text, which ends with a question, and then each alternative answer choice is listed with the feedback that you give if the student says that answer. There was another type of question, a tutorial-based question, which is indicated by a double slash and a T, and that takes three choices, which might be quite complex choices, like the one about how you would cope with anxiety about a presentation that I showed you. And in that case, you just give the system three choices. Again, the first one is the correct one, and the system randomly assigns those to one of the three virtual students, Andrew, Brenda, or Colette, who are actually voices created by Amazon in the cloud using their speech synthesis technology. But you don't have to worry about that. The system does all that automatically. So it makes it really easy to produce these kind of quite engaging presentations. And anyone can do it. You just need to be able to write text and send it to me so I can put it into the system. At the moment, anybody who wants to write stuff for this, they can just give it to me and I will publish it online, and then students can access it by going to the Alexa app and just saying, go to whatever, Toby's biology unit or whatever, and it will take you to that unit and give them that content. And it's all done with open anonymous access. So Amazon might know who you are, but we don't. So we don't track individuals' performance. It's just like they're opening a textbook. We don't know that they're opening the textbook. We don't know they're reading it. So this aspect of the system is anonymous. and doesn't collect any data about the students except as an aggregate, so we can identify questions that cause common problems and fix that. The learning units all have this basic structure. It's a very simple structure called a herringbone structure. Each page is like in a linear sequence, so we design our optimal sequence that we want to take the student through to lead them from their initial state of knowledge to whatever we want them to be able to do at the end of the session. And we plan it much like we might plan a PowerPoint slide, except that each slide is just a chunk of conversational text with a multiple choice question at the end. And then, depending on their answer, they either proceed to the next unit or they get sidelined and given some remedial feedback, told what they're wrong and why they're wrong, and if they get it right, they're told they're right and why they're right. So this captures certain important features that are good for engagement, like immediate reinforcement, active responses, things that have been shown to produce compulsive behavior. And this is what casinos use and social media apps use to keep people logged in. So why not use the same forces for good, to get students engaged in education rather than gambling or Instagram. Now, the technology behind the system, like I said, I was excited that yesterday was the first time I'd actually used the full system live. We wrote a script based on teaching students about email etiquette. We did it in about 20 minutes from the initial idea to publishing it in versions that could run on all these different devices. It's not currently running on Google Assistant, but it will. It's currently running on Alexa and an HTML version which you can put on Canvas and students can download as a sort of standalone unit. So the content the system generates is something you can take away and keep and distribute, but it will also be accessible via these voice systems in the cloud. I'm always a bit using that phrase. It always sounds like you might be insane when you talk about having this sort of system that's based in the cloud and it does all that thing. It does sound once like it's behaviour that once would have been considered mad, just like people walking down the street talking to themselves, apparently. It was once a sign of madness, but it's now just a sign of social engagement. So, why do we use this idea of conversational text? It's fundamental to the system. It's PowerPoint slides aren't fundamental to human nature, but conversation is. Humans aren't geared up for reading dense academic text, but they are geared up for having a chat and knowing what to do in a conversation, to the extent that even pre-verbal infants show turn-taking ability. I'll risk showing a YouTube video, but this is a good illustration of turn-taking. Well, it goes on like that in much the same vein for quite a bit more. It's not very stimulating intellectually, but it does illustrate a point. And it's not just those babies that do it. All babies have this normal tendency to interact conversationally. And it's the way that we've taught for a very long time. The Socratic dialogue is a conversation that's designed to lead a student to a certain conclusion themselves. And it's also future compatible because we're increasingly moving towards systems like voice assistants which don't let you show people pictures or videos. They only do conversation, and they're becoming more popular. So one of my points is we should get into that space because it's becoming very important, and it's, especially amongst our sort of key target market, young people are increasingly using this kind of voice assistants and chatbots in their everyday lives. Another, I don't ask you to take this, so what is effectively a cognitive psychology course crammed into one diagram, but the key idea here is that when we're trying to learn something, we're trying to teach the student a new idea built out of existing ideas in their long-term memory. But we've got to do it using this working memory, which has got a very small capacity. So we can only really teach somebody a simple chunk of information at one instant. And if we do that and we then immediately ask them a question which tests their knowledge of it and give them feedback on it, that is possibly the single most effective way of testing or teaching a concept. Now, limiting, a lot of people have said to me with this system, can't you do this, can't you do that? Isn't it a bit limiting that the only content you can produce is text and conversational text? And the answer is no. Good, well-written, carefully constructed text is the most effective way to teach a concept. There are only rare examples. There are certain concepts which aren't purely visual, and maybe if I was teaching art history or something like that, color perception, tea tasting, wine tasting. These are things I can't teach with just text, but most of the academic stuff I do teach can be taught purely through conversation. And this isn't intended to replace conventional texts and PowerPoints and so on, but it's meant to stand alone and be usable without having to refer to external sources. I threw this in there, this famous quote from Pascal, I've only made this letter longer because I've not had time to make it shorter. And it reflects the thing, which we probably all find, it actually takes a lot longer to make a shorter presentation like this. I probably produced about 3 times as many slides for this presentation as ended up in it, because I realized there just wouldn't be time to cover it. So it's important that the words we use are right. But by limiting ourselves to words, we also open up various experiences, various opportunities. So for example, the concept of universal design says basically that we should design things for everybody from the first instance. So rather than design something and then think, oh, well, we need to create a special exit or an entrance for this user group, we think of it from the start. The example they give in universal design in architecture is the idea of adding a wheelchair ramp to a building. Yes, it makes it accessible, and maybe you've only done it because you were required to by law, but it also makes it more accessible for everyone else. People with pushchairs, people delivering goods, elderly people who maybe use a walking stick, they can all enter the building more easily. And a similar thing happens when we restrict ourselves to conversational text. Suddenly we can make the system as accessible to as many people as possible. And not just in terms of people who have special access requirements, but also to everyone, so that somebody can now do their tutorial while they're going for their morning jog, for example, which they couldn't do with a PowerPoint presentation, but they can do with a conversational agent on their phone and their earbuds. So the idea is that everyone gets equal access and can choose the means of access when and where they want to use it. And that can only be a good thing. From my own experience of learning languages was that I found it, I got a lot better when I started using the Duolingo app on my mobile phone, because I started being able to do lessons on the train on the way into work, a time I previously wasn't really using constructively. And it was good. And it was partly the inspiration behind this system, which was the idea of using something like Duolingo, but for teaching academic topics like psychology. So another feature that the text-based approach allows us to do is optimal learning. when we speak, when we hear words, we aren't just using the verbal parts of our brain, we're using the visual imagination. When we read a book, for example, we are using our visual imagination. If we are reading or hearing some words and simultaneously looking at a diagram, the two will tend to interfere with one another, unless there is a very good match between what's being said and what's being demonstrated. So if it's a purely visual concept, that might be fine. But for most presentations, it's actually just getting the message across as simply as possible is the most effective strategy again. And again, this is because of these limitations on our working memory. Another feature of text is ease of production. If you only have to write, we can do it anywhere. We don't need to look for images to illustrate our point. We don't need to record videos. We don't need to spend lots of money on multimedia. And that means we don't get put off doing it. We can just sit down and do it. So I think for me, that was the most important thing. I wanted to be able to construct content quickly and know I could do it quickly and not have to faff about with lots of different bits of software and media. So right away, this is going to up my ability to produce interactive content by limiting it to text. And it's forward and backward compatible. So with this system, it can even, the content is produced in a format that restricts it so that it can be produced in a purely paper-based textbook for record-keeping purposes, for external review purposes, for authorship and attribution purposes. The content that you publish in the system can be treated like a conventional book. You could even lodge a copy with the British Library like a conventional book. It wouldn't be as interactive or engaging, but it's the fact that it gives you that, it also gives you the same sort of copyright, intellectual property right protections that you get when you write a textbook as a lecturer, which is an important issue because the intellectual property rights regarding textbooks are typically considered to remain in the authorship of academics, whereas if you create a fancy app, it might be considered universities in intellectual property. So for that reason, I've tried to keep it restricted to this conventional publishing model. There's three educational urban legends which I wanted to address because there are often objections to this. One is the idea that learners are digital natives, that they can multitask and so on. It's not true. Even the young people today who have lots of experience of multitasking still have to switch between tasks mentally. They can't simultaneously carry on two conversations, for example. Secondly, myth, learning styles, the idea that some learners are visual and some are tactile, etc., is a myth. And learners are self-educators, that you can just set them free on the internet with a question and leave them to their own devices is also a myth. So am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of minutes.
Okay, so just very briefly then, these show two of these applied multi-part questions. So this is to show that you can use a simple multiple choice format to assess quite difficult concepts. So this was a couple of vignettes that were generated according to a question recipe. It can produce 1 million different versions of the question, each with a different vignette, each with different right answers. So it's a way to produce large numbers of assessment items as well that can be used within this system. And that takes a simple text file as well and produces this complex branching scenario which students can navigate through to try and find the right answer. And we should get into voice because it's predicted that by 2021 there will be almost as many voice-activated assistants on the planet as people. And they're increasing in popularity in education. They're getting everywhere. And people like using them. So we should use them too. And I just want to acknowledge my son, Jacob Pake, who actually did all the hard work in implementing this system on Alexa for our company, which we set up to do it, called Psychonovo. And that will be live any minute now. It's still set up for the DigiFest demo, but it will be going live soon, and you'll be able to use it if you've got an Alexa, and you'll also be able to write content for it and deliver it to your students this semester if you want to. So sorry I took a little longer. That's my talk. Thanks. Okay. Do you want to? I won't ask any questions because it would be rude.
Perhaps people could ask questions while the next.
Yeah, I'll just. That's fine. Yeah, please go ahead. I just need to disconnect everything.
Not really.
Right. Do you want to switch? Do you want to?
I'll just.
Do you want to log in there?
That's all right. I'm just going to do it straight from my
Okay.
laptop. I'll just